Καλησπέρα σας. In a 1998 article to the Yale Journal of International Law entitled "The Historical and Legal Interconnections Between the Armenian Genocide and the Jewish Holocaust, From Impunity to Retributive Justice." Guess who is? It was Vahang Dadrian that we lost recently in August this year. He was examining the key point of divergence between the two genocides. That is, this is his words, the shift in the international legal response from the acceptance of immunity to the imposition of retributive justice. Dadrian maintained that allies, who won the war, their resolve was to administer justice at Nuremberg, and that was hardened by a desire to end the legacy of impunity. In his opinion, massacres of Armenians served indeed as a matrix for the development of a mechanism of retributive justice in Nuremberg that succeeded in setting new standards for international jurisprudence. Obviously, as far as the Ottoman Empire and Turkey are concerned, the retributive justice didn't happen. I mean, we are talking about this since this morning. Quite to the contrary, they got away with 3 decades of ethno-religious cleansing. This is a political science term, Tessa. Targeting all non-Muslim populations. But did they really get away with it? This is my question. With the impunity becoming a fundamental trait of the Turkish politics, the retribution of 30 years-long state-sponsored intensive crimes happened in another way, by perverting the entire political system as well as the Turkish society. My talk will thus concentrate on the political, ethical relations between the series of massacres and Turkey of today. So is it possible for a system that was founded, that was built on this series of atrocities and the total liquidation of non-Muslim citizens of the Ottoman Empire, without giving the slightest account of what happened, to perform in a sound way? That's a question. How this huge loss of civilization determine today's political life? Well, before having a look to today's Turkey, let me briefly recall the deeds of the period which starts in 1894. Just a recap, they were mentioned extensively, but the first sizable killings against non-Muslims are the 1894-97, the infamous Hamidian massacres, named after Sultan Hamid. They were targeting Armenians and were followed by the 1909 Adana massacres that the Baron Harutyun just mentioned to you. Again targeting the Armenians in Adana and its wider region. These Hamidian massacres are very poorly documented and stayed in the shadows of the upcoming genocide, unfortunately. The most surviving, what happened? The most detailed account is that of Monseigneur Félix Charmetan. He is the director of l'Œuvre d'Orient, a Catholic charity. No public inquiry was conducted. 1909 occurred in the second year of the second constitutional monarchy period, and the parliamentary committee was set. It was comprising Armenian deputies, and it conducted hearings on the spot for a parliamentary inquiry commission. The case of Edirne deputy, Hagop Babikyan, is telling. He mysteriously got assassinated the day before the disclosure of the joint report, which was never officialized. Why I'm talking about this? Because to give you details of the persistent impunity. Follows the pogroms of North Aegean against the Rum Greek population, particularly after the Balkan Wars, lost by the Ottoman Empire. They were piloted by the top ittihadist in the region, the future president Celal Bayar, with his nom de guerre, Galip Hoca. These pogroms were aiming at terrorizing the Greek population, the Rum population of the Aegean, to simply make them abandon their lands and belongings. No legal action was ever introduced against these perpetrators either. So then comes the great crime of genocide, which in some 16 months, it's important to always recall this, 16 months, only 16 months, during 1915-1916, annihilates more than 1.5 million Ottoman Armenians and 300,000, let's not forget them, Assyrians or Syriacs, the Saipho genocide. The unique judicial probation against the perpetrators happened under extraordinary conditions. It was just mentioned in the previous session. This jurisdiction, why extraordinary? Because they happened in occupied Istanbul by the Allies. Court-martial's verdicts against the perpetrators included prime ministers, ministers, and high officials. Nevertheless, of course, with the rise and overturn of the Sèvres Treaty, well, the entire judicial architecture and the retributive justice, if any, have aborted, with a few exceptions, one hanged, and that's all. So in the meantime, some perpetrators were punished, but I mean, this is probably the single case of retributive justice that happened in the Ottoman Empire, and as I repeat, that happened under extraordinary conditions of an occupied Istanbul. At the same time, happens the Pontic genocide, starting 1914, spreading over until 1921, for which there has been, again, no single judicial action. So the Republican era, which follows, finishes the job of ethno-religious cleansing through an exchange of population between Greece and Turkey. This is why the term of ethno-religious cleansing is so relevant, because the exchange of population cannot be qualified as genocide, of course. So those who were subjected to the exchange were forbidden to come back in their native lands, exactly like for the surviving Armenians whose claims to return were duly rejected by the Kemalists. That is around 22, 23, 24. All these deeds against the legal citizens, I repeat, the legal citizens of the empire as well as the republic, have been duly sealed in an international act. It's called the Lausanne Treaty, which de facto choose to overlook the atrocities and to grant impunity. The Republicans continued the ethno-religious cleansing in a reduced scale. The most notorious acts are the anti-Jewish pogroms of Eastern Thrace of 1934, overtaxing the non-Muslim businessmen in 1942, the anti-Rum Greek pogroms of 1955, the Septembriana, and the mass expulsion of Istanbul Rum in 1964. So as for the Muslim constituents, because they are part, of course, of this overall ideology, the Tertele of Dersim, against the Alevis in 1937-38, and the ongoing war against Kurds, although unsuccessful in terms of cleansing, nevertheless follow, unfortunately, the same logic. In the Ottoman Empire and Turkey by the turn of 20th century, Nikos, the nation-building process has led to unseen massacres of Ottoman and Turkish citizens, in particular of non-Muslims. The ethno-religious cleansing has taken place in absolute impunity for its instigators, and they have been erased as much as possible. So the Republican Turkey, and I'm coming to my question of the beginning, the Republican Turkey choose to forget it and choose to make sure that it will be forgotten by the population. So all present-day ideologies and political movements in Turkey, with the exception of the Kurdish political movement, either reject or simply endorse and defend these facts and their consequences on the victims, be it killings, spoliations, expropriations, or denial of citizenship. Such choice is intimately related to the fear of retribution more than universal opprobrium or criticism. This voluntary amnesia or denialism has in turn shaped the Turkish political culture, in which learning from the past doesn't exist. Past atrocities are either unknown or they are total abstractions for those who vaguely heard about them, or they are purely rejected. In any case, there are not many in present-day Turkey, frankly, who questions the link between the past atrocities and today's social, psychological, and political decay. Not to mention the recurrence of the behavior which led to these atrocities in the past. So we are witnessing such recurrence in the war against the Kurds, which was just mentioned by Cemil Bazidi. The other salient legacy of the ethno-religious cleansing is the impunity. Extremely few officials have undergone a due judicial process, as I just mentioned, in 1919, and were punished for the atrocities. The culture of impunity, and this is key, has in turn developed into widespread irresponsibility, non-accountability of public officials, and a sense of absolute rightfulness of the deeds. That equates to widespread injustice through the dysfunction of judiciary and the destruction of the sense of justice in the society. The only exception remains the crimes against state, which are always punished. Actually, here lies one of the cornerstones of Turkish politics that is endorsed by the vast majority, the principle of not creating erstwhile offenders, in Turkish, devri sabık. As long as irresponsible and non-accountable officials are not punished for their deeds, to the contrary, are kind of congratulated for these, the culture repeats itself. In time, creating every time more law breaks, simultaneously the capacity of the society to digest these illegal deeds, these evil acts grows and it becomes commonplace. Let me give you two examples to the broad degeneration that holding up Turkey. You probably remember the coup d'etat of 12 September 1980. Well, a lawsuit against two of the still living members was launched in 2012, very late, following the voiding of Article 15, which was protecting them of the Constitution. That was historic, nevertheless. Retributive justice, people were very excited. Well, a criminal court handed them over life sentences in June 2014 and decided to remove their military titles and to confiscate their property. So no jailing, but still. While the case was forwarded to the higher court, the Court of Appeals, these two guys died. They passed away. They were already very, very old. The court decided to discontinue the trial, and the final verdict was announced last April this year. Not many people protested in Turkey. In some, as it was done for all the past crimes, the extensive oppression of the 1980 coup d'etat were whitewashed. The second example is a more recent one. On the 17th and 25th of December 2013, there was a disclosure of corruption pinpointing at highest officials of the country, including today's president. The proofs were so evident, obvious, and the size of the corruption was such that it looked very difficult to get away with it. Well, not only any lawsuit was lodged against the suspects, but it became very dangerous to even talk about it in today's Turkey. So within the same logic, the present regime, which has violated countless times the laws and the Constitution, which has created an unprecedented institutional social wreckage in the country and continue to do so, should have been tried accordingly in a normal country. Well, in Turkey, Turkey lacks categorically this sort of modus operandi. I'm finishing. Probably present day's unlawful political, economic, and social practices appear trivial compared to past genocides, pogroms, mass killings, and spoliations, aren't they? After all, what is few $1 billion of embezzlement compared to mass killings of millions of individuals 100 years ago? Finally, the absolute rightfulness deriving from the impunity. More the crimes go unpunished, more the perpetrators feel right in their deeds. Such mentality never apologizes, but makes others apologize. It categorically rejects empathy. Today, the culture of absolute rightfulness is, unfortunately, widespread. The country has become a museum of malicious acts, crimes that has never been questioned, whose perpetrators have always gotten away with what they had done. But paradoxically, it is frankly, that's my final point, it's no exaggeration to say that today Turkey is going indirectly through a retributive justice and paying the price of unaccounted past crimes by destroying itself, its political and social fabric. Thank you.